In the last episode that we did, we talked about Mad Max, and I was under the impression that Mad Max 1 was going to be this movie, which it wasn't.
Everyone thinks Mad Max is going to be this movie. Everyone thinks Mad Max only exists in the post-apocalypse.
Well, what's funny is, I mean, the way that this film sells itself and the narrative device that it uses to exist is so bizarre to me. But you kind of alluded to it last episode we did, where it's like, oh, these are all essentially being told in a, passing along of information folk story style about Mad Max. And it's like, we saw him one day and he helped us, and then we never saw him again. And I guess what's weird is, I guess the world fell apart really quickly. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it's a nuclear situation.
Right.
During Mad Max, everything is breaking down, and we may even be at war, or everyone might be at war. It takes place in Australia, obviously, but it's a world war situation at that point, and maybe Australia isn't in it, but certainly soon after Max leaves the police force and his wife and child have been murdered, the world goes nuclear, and there are a few survivors, but what there are left all dress like the local kink shop explode.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
Oh, baby.
And Vernon Wells, I feel like he is comfortable with that. I mean, he's used to wearing all sorts of leather, right?
Assless chaps, man. By the way, aren't all chaps assless?
Which is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, but do we just like saying assless chaps just because it conjures the image where your mind should focus? Is that what that is?
Where the little cutout window for your butt.
Yeah, you go, oh, yeah,
but you wear jeans.
The ass would be framed perfectly there, wouldn't it? Yes, assless chaps.
But you wear jeans. Yeah, you don't just wear I mean, I don't know. Lord Humongous.
I was naked wearing chaps.
Yeah, right. Lord Humongous might wear chaps, though.
He doesn't need to wear anything, really, except that tiny little thing with the body he's got.
Yeah. So if you don't know what we're talking about on this episode of the Culture Cast, I'm still your host, Chris Dasher, and I'm joined by my good friend all the way from Midnight Viewing and Dark Destinations, Father Malone.
Just walk away. All the violence will end. Just walk away. Giving Mike White a run for his money.
He's a little...
Walk away, Mike White.
He doesn't have this... I was going to say, there is a little Swedish tinge to it. The way he
Mike was hitting that. Yeah, mine's just an angry dude.
And on this episode of the Culture Cast, we're continuing our look at Mad Max with a look at Mad Max 2 from 1981.
The Road Warrior. Time magazine calls it Apocalypse Pow, exhilarating entertainment. The New York Times calls it an extravagant film fantasy that's action-packed. And Playboy magazine says it has a final pursuit sequence as breathtaking as the big chase in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Road Warrior. See it now. Rated R.
Once again, it's directed by George Miller, written by Terry Hayes, George Miller, and Brian Hannant, and it stars Mel Gibson. Once again, if you want to know our thoughts on Mel Gibson, check out the first episode of the show, because we're not going to be talking about Mel Gibson that way anymore. It also stars Bruce Spence, Mike Preston, Kel Nilsson, who plays Lord Humongous, and Vernon Wells, who plays, once again, a villain clad in leather, just like in Commando.
It also stars Virginia Hay as Warrior Woman. Fans of Farscape, Pau Zotozan is in this movie as a survivor. She's one of the good guys, one of the survivors in white hair manning the flamethrower.
Which is crazy, because, we'll get to it when we get to it. There's a lot of stuff that happens at the end of the movie that happens with zero fanfare. Let's just put it that way. Father Malone, I'm going to kick it to you as always. Thoughts on Mad Max 2? Give me the rundown on Mad Max 2.
Mad Max 2, or as the right world knows it, the Road Warrior, the right thinking world. It's one of the most important films of the 1980s. Sort of just full stop, I guess you should say. You really can't overestimate its importance in action film. Once again, whatever Mad Max was doing, this one is doing just a couple years later at an incredibly dizzying height of insanity. What looked dangerous in the last film, you no doubt is terrifyingly so here. It continues a story of a character and manages to take a character who was living in one scenario, pull him into almost a completely different genre, and it feels totally fine. boy, this movie, I guess I saw around the same time as Mad Max, so it was kind of a double feature on the television at the time, all the time. And this one I watched a lot, certainly a lot more than Mad Max. This one is much more of a comic book, and I think that's why it's more popular, ultimately. It's certainly a much more visually appealing than, basically just proto-futuristic Melbourne or Sydney or something. Like the wastelands here and the people populating it are always fun to watch. And what you just said, which I had said, that these are little folk tales, rewatching it again last night, it really sort of struck home that the narrator of this film is that feral child, that little kid who's got a boomerang and is not afraid to use it. This is what we're witnessing as a film, is an eyewitness account of what happened when Max Rockatansky happened upon the settlement that this kid was living in. So this is like the first gospel of Max.
And I like that aspect of the movie because I think it works to the film's favor in this film, and then obviously in the next one, way more so, I feel like, in terms of talking about expectation versus reality with folk stories. I mean, that kind of plays into the second and third act. It's interesting because, this movie I'm not going to say it's not a movie, but it's not really a movie. It's really like two very long action scenes with a little bit of something else in between. And I think that also, Mad Max Fury Road ends up being what this movie probably would have wanted to be if it could have been, which is a massive chase movie the entire movie. And this movie pretty much is, there's very few scenes that are people just standing around talking. And for the most part, it's people talking at Mel Gibson. He has like 15 lines in this movie, if that. Like, it's a shockingly small amount of dialogue for our hero, mind you. But look, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it more than the last one for a whole host of reasons. And you mentioned kind of the long tail of influence that this film has on film. Also has a really big influence on video games too, because Borderlands is pretty much just Mad Max by any other name. Like, it's not a dystopia, but like it has the feel that Mad Max does. It has like the weird barbarian psycho characters. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on in kind of this desert planet. And this has that same weird shit going on in Australia post-apocalypse. And that's what I appreciate about this movie, is it is so different from the last one that it doesn't even feel like you need to see the last movie, frankly. They do a pretty good job at giving you all you need to know at the beginning of this movie that you could just go, maybe I don't even need to see the last one.
Yeah, it's one of those situations like they used to do this in the early 1980s when everyone was just getting used to the multitude of sequels, that whatever the first couple sequels are, they would do a recap of the last film. So they do it very cleverly here. Like, you are correct. You do not need to have seen Mad Max. They cut scenes from his life into the opening crawl. In fact, while watching the opening montage here, it made me realize that as a kid, I thought I had watched Mad Max more than I had because they recap it here at the beginning. Anyway, what's clever about it is they not only give you the personal history of Max, but they weave it into how the world fell apart and where we are now and Max's place in it. So it's great. And what would feel like an info dump, or if it was in George Lucas's hands, it would be a slow crawl of text,
right,
is done so economically here.
Well, and it's done so well that it knows that it has a pretty steep hill to climb. Because again, this movie is so different from the last one that it not only has to catch people up who haven't seen the last one, but it also has to kind of catch up the people who did see the last one to the world that Mad Max occupies now. Because it is so drastically different. There was no, whatever the hell they're called, gasoline. There was no gasoline shortage in the last movie. And that is going to...
was. It just wasn't such a major plot point.
Right. Again, like, yeah, to your point, like they didn't make it the fucking point of the movie, I guess is what I'm getting at. And in this movie and somewhat in the next one, it's kind of a big part of the movie is the fight for resources, whatever they are, and I find that to be interesting because I understand why people who saw the first one would like this one. And again, not to jump ahead to the next movie, but I can also see why people who like this one and the last one would look at the third one and go, what the fuck is this? But here's the thing for me. Mad Max has made it very clear as a franchise that it can pivot. So why do you expect it's not going to pivot again? And it's not like it doesn't have any car chases. There is a rather extended car chase in the third movie, but the first and second movie are pretty much the second movie for sure. The first one has a fair amount too, just like constant car chases, constant that are extended. It's not like 2 seconds either. It's a pretty extended amount of time.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the third one. I don't need to defend it here, but plenty of action in that one too. Plenty of crazy action in that one too.
You're not going to have to defend the third one to me. Let's put it that way.
Well, all right.
Yeah,
Let's continue with the Road Warrior, Mad Max 2.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at is like, I understand if you get to the third movie and you like these last two, why you're going to get there, because this movie and the last movie are very similar in what they're trying to do. This honestly, in a lot of ways, is just a big budget version of the last movie. Like, and not the way Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are. That's literally the same plot.
Terminator 2.
But that's the weird thing, though. In Evil Dead, they recap the last movie at the beginning of the second movie, just like this movie does. So you don't even have to watch. It kind of goes out of its way to say, you don't want to watch the first movie? Fine. Here's all you need to know. I mean, really all we need to know about Max from the first movie is he is a man without a country, effectively. He has no wife. He has no kid. His best friend is dead. Like, that's all we really need to know.
He's a broken man out in the wasteland, and he's got a dingo.
Yeah. Yeah. And he became this way. He wasn't always this way, which is the other, I guess, but does that even matter to the narrative?
No.
Right.
No,
like it doesn't. He doesn't even matter to the story, I think, is the thing that, I mean, not that Mad Max doesn't matter, but like, he is just us as the audience. Really, Mad Max as a character is a cipher more in this movie than he was in the last one. Like, is so much more because he really doesn't say or do anything in this movie for the audience's benefit.
No, this movie establishes that. They front load the information, but each of these films just can begin with him wandering into the scenario,
right?
And off we go, and that proves over and over again. And that it certainly worked in Fury Road. Like,
right.
What were we given of his backstory there? Nothing. Just him pissing, and then let's go.
Well, that's the thing that I like about what George Miller is doing with these movies is what you kind of alluded to with Gulliver's Travels. It's just a guy wandering the wasteland, getting into these little adventures. Like, why does it doesn't need to be anything more than that at all. I mean, there's plenty of yahoos in the wasteland for Mad Max to interact with. We're going to see that when the new one comes out. Like you said, we saw it in Fury Road, because Fury Road's not a prequel. Fury Road takes chronologically after the second and third Mad Max movie, right? I mean, that's
I believe George Miller had said that. Like, he's not telling a story out of order necessarily.
No, same guy, same thing.
Could be.
Right. But at the same time, my
Road
point
Warrior could be the final story. Maybe he dies in that scenario, and Emil Minty as the feral kid is telling lies. I don't know.
Well, that's fair, because I mean, to your point, that is part of the thing that I really enjoyed about this movie is the unreliable narrator. Because it's like, well, it was me the whole time. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And that's also why it had like a rather like upbeat ending.
You know, it would be cool if in a future Mad Max movie, it's actually narrated by Max himself.
I was honestly kind of surprised that I guess maybe Furiosa could be. That would kind of interesting if he was narrating her story.
Oh, that would be weird, yeah.
But to your point, to your point, like Mad Max now, it feels like is not even important enough to be the headliner of his own film, which is fine. She has taken that over. Furiosa has as a character, which I'm perfectly fine with. Mad Max is the man with no name. He really is.
Hey man, if people just need the chase movie, the Road Warrior, like if people have problems with any of the other Mad Max movies, including the original movie, it's because they just want the remake of the Road Warrior over and over again. And if you just want that chase movie, then fine, let Furiosa have it. Like make a dozen of those Furiosa movies and just make it the Fast and the Furious in the Wastelands and let those people have those movies. And whatever Max's next fucking outing happens to be, like, let it be as weird as possible. Like, if he wants to go to space, I'm going to go to space with Max.
Right. Well, and again, that's kind of the thing that I appreciate about this series so far is that it doesn't seem to be beholden to anybody in terms of the stories they're telling. George Miller wants to tell the kind of story that he wants to tell, and this is very much his story. Has his fingerprints all over it, from the weird characters to the dial. I mean, Lord Humongous is, I mean, it's not that he doesn't have a lot of screen time, but every time he's on screen, draws your attention, that's for sure. It's something else. But so is Vernon Wells. I mean, so is Bruce Spence, for that matter. Most everybody in this movie knows why they're here, and they're doing the thing perfectly.
I love Bruce Spence, man.
I know, he's so good in this movie.
I'm sure most Americans, young Americans, know him, if they know him at all, is from The Matrix.
Oh.
The Matrix sequel. He's the guy in the train station, or in the Attack of the Clones, or was that the Revenge of the Sith? Which one was it? I think it was Attack of the Clones. He was that like long, thin alien. You know what? Look, he's been around in Australia forever. Like, he did a bunch of like early sex comedies in the 1970s.
Sure did.
Parodies of Alfie, and those are great. And he's great in all of those. But for those of you who have those Lord of the Rings discs with the deleted scenes, or maybe you can just look it up on YouTube, there's a sequence in Return of the King when our heroes have gathered at the gates of Mordor, and out comes the mouth of Sauron. And it's this character, it's Bruce Spence. So they've digitally made his mouth bigger. You can't see any of his eyes or anything. It's just a crown that comes down to his mouth. And then under it, the mouth, they've made the entire size of his face. And it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. So anyway, Bruce Spence, I love him there. I love him here. I love this character in particular, this gyro pilot.
I was going to say, I know Bruce Spence. The thing I know him from is Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, who plays one of the poachers in that movie, which is so bizarre to me because for all intents and purposes, I should remember him from The Matrix, I guess.
It's one of the only things he's sort of, I guess more people would know him from the Ace Ventura movie. I'm not as familiar with those movies.
You mean Ace Ventura 2, and then Ace Ventura Jr.?
I somehow missed that trilogy.
Ace Ventura 2 is not, it's different and weird, but he plays a poacher in that movie. Well. Which, I mean, again, like perfect, character actor type role for him. He's great here. I mean, look, what's funny is obviously we're going to be talking about him a lot in the next episode too. And I find this character to be interesting because it was such a well thought out character. They just brought him back in the next movie, essentially, but with a kid this time.
Right. But that's a different guy.
A completely different guy. They were like, well, we need a gyrocopter type. Why don't we? Bruce Spence, we'll just have him come in again. Like, wait, what? That's the idea.
I love the idea that Max keeps running into these. And now, honestly, we'll talk about it when we get to the next movie. But I hope that is this guy.
It's not.
It can't be, because that guy goes on. The guy here ends up like leading this tribe.
Right. Like that. And that's the other thing that's pretty wild about this movie. And that's the thing that I really appreciate about the narrative contained within is Max really isn't the point of these stories. He's the point of the story, but like these people continue on without him. He is just there for a moment. It feels so much like the Incredible Hulk and all those other things where he just wanders into town, does whatever and leaves. I mean, Fistful of Dollars was like that. Same thing. I mean, they call him the man with no name in the next movie. Literally. It's super on the nose, but if anything reminds me of these movies, these are Westerns. These are just Australian dystopian Westerns. That's what they feel like. I mean, it operates by such Western conventions for the most part.
1000%. This movie is definitely a Western. It's so remarkably a Western. It's a lawless frontier, like bands of outlaws and settlements of farmers. In this case, gas farmers.
Right.
Need help, and in comes a wandering gunslinger.
Yeah.
His gun, of course, being the last of the V8 Interceptors.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. He doesn't even use gun. Mad Max is like, that's part of the gag, is like he doesn't even have any ammo for his guns because ammo is so scarce.
It always misfires. Yeah, I know, and I like that. I like that the world is broken down and they recognize that pretty much everything is going to break down.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of another, style of dystopian cinema, like zombie movies, that's always been my issue with zombie movies. Like the bullets run out at some point. Yeah, what are you going to do? And this movie addresses that. It's like, there's nothing you can do. Those bullets become like gold. Because a gun without any bullets is effectively a fucking paperweight, by the way. I mean, literally a paperweight.
You know, I was pretty much with the movie Zombieland until they turned on all the rides at the park, and I was like, where are they getting that power? Seems like everything is pretty much dead at this point. Well, I mean, you could make the excuse that they're running on nuclear, but I don't think so.
No, and that's what I appreciate about Mad Max, the series, is George Miller thinks of everything, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, like, and for me, as someone who appreciates a director who is putting everything of themselves on screen and thinking of everything, George Miller strikes me as the kind of director and screenwriter who thinks these things out and through completely. And there isn't any real look. I mean, the tone of this movie is so different from the last one, but it makes sense. It like this logically tracks. Is it kind of a complete 180? Sure. But that's okay. Like, I'll tell you, if this was coming out now, people would be up in arms. What the fuck are you doing to my franchise? Like, this is the hardest kind of pivot, right? Like, this is a pretty hard pivot.
Yeah.
Effectively, the last movie was just Fast and the Furious. Like, I mean, barely any sort of future anything. I mean, the gasoline, they barely even talk about it in the last movie. But now everything is like, not futuristic, but this, I don't know what you would call it, like apocalypse futuristic. Like this is such a distinct look to it that Mad Max kind of conjures this look into existence, and everybody else more or less cops from it. I mean, even something like Borderlands, I mean, it looks very much like this. Lots of weird, unique looking characters.
Well, you know, you said about it, like the fans of the franchise freaking out when they sort of changed the genre up a little bit. Like we saw that happen. Like, thank God when he did Fury Road, he ended up giving the people what they want, which was a giant chase movie. Because we saw with, say, Phantom Menace that, God forbid, if you show how a civilization collapses and include a scene at the Galactic Senate, that people will be making fun of it as the most boring thing they've ever seen.
I do. I've been saying this recently, and I think it probably bears repeating now. Boy, those prequels have aged a lot better in light of how bad the sequels were.
Oh, well, that's you know,
it's true though.
Hold comfort. Maybe, but you know what? I've always said that those prequels, like them or not, all have some pretty fucking fantastic set pieces, and they are not those first three Star Wars movies.
No,
they feel like they're part of the story, and they feel separate and distinct than those first three. Whereas the three sequels we just got were just like, yeehaw, nostalgia.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that I find interesting about Mad Max as a franchise is Fury Road. What nostalgia baiting does that film do? What nostalgia baiting does this film do for the last movie? Nothing. It's not like they were like, here, they mentioned the Interceptor once, and in the last movie, they don't even make a big deal out of it because we see 4 or 5 of them. It's not just one. I mean, there are a bunch in the previous movie. Now it's made clear to us that is not the case anymore.
What's funny is, I mean, because that line is in the movie, The Last of the V8 Interceptors. Like, that line just sort of kind of echoed out into the fan community because we've all made way too much of Mad Max's car. He barely uses that car. He uses it a little bit at the beginning just to get to where he's going. He doesn't really use it. As soon as he's free, that car is effectively destroyed. We don't see it at all in the next movie. And in the start of the one after, they wreck it almost instantly again. It's for such a legendary car, it sure gets fucked up a lot.
Well, it's legendary from the last movie, I guess, right? Like there are things from this movie that I think are much more iconic to this movie. I mean, all the cars at the end of the movie are so distinct and unique to look at. And I think for me, that's like one of the biggest successes of this movie. And I think all the Mad Maxes is to go back to George Miller's style being so... It reminds me of George Lucas. Like, there's something about it. It feels lived in. Like when Dan O'Bannon wrote Alien. I mean, part of that script is to make it a real lived in science fiction world. And Mad Max feels lived in. It's not shiny. It's not polished. It's literally the desert. These people are covered in dirt and grime and whatever the fuck else. And people's lives are taken with like zero, just nobody cares. There's zero, like anything. Mercy is not a thing here for anybody. Everybody is just shot and murdered at will for the most part. because the resources are so scarce. And I like that about this movie. I mean, to your point about the prequels, how dare you try to actually build a world? Because look, the original Star Wars movies weren't necessarily interested in doing that. But when given the opportunity to put some world building into a movie, I don't think it's a bad thing. And this movie has a little bit of it. Again, it uses an expository crutch, but I think the payoff being we're watching one of the characters who is the narrator in the entire time. I think it works in the movie's favor, but there's plenty of movies where this narrative device could sink the entire movie.
You know, it does feel a lot like sort of early George Lucas as far as the handmade quality and the ingenuity of it and the lived-in quality. But it's also, hiring artisans around him to make these things possible. Like, obviously, he's hiring people who are fucking welding masters and are down in Australia creating works of art and saying, hey, could you do this for this car? And could you do it using technology that would just be laying around? Because that's all that's left. The desert is so sparse in these movies, and the technology that we see is pretty spare as well. So it's not like something like Brazil where we can see all of the like recycled technology like on full display. But here, the recycled technology moves and is part of the action. It's quite incredible to behold.
Well, and to your point, it's so distinctive and unique. I mean, even now it still feels distinctive. Obviously, like I've alluded to, this has really been copped from and copied so many times at this point by so many different kinds of movies. You remember the movie Doomsday?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like this man, what else is it copied from?
That movie was an Escape from New York remake with a Road Warrior aesthetic.
Yeah, which is weird, right? But that's the thing for me that works with the Road Warrior aesthetic is you can do a lot with it, and you can tell different kinds of stories, because that's, this movie, I think, in terms of the story it's telling, is distinct enough from the last movie. I mean, again, we have a little bit more of a rundown society. We have a little bit more violence. We have higher stakes because he's helping this community as opposed to just himself trying to prevent his wife and son from being murdered. So it's interesting that people didn't have a problem with this movie kind of slowing down for a little bit and having this kind of societal, back and forth between Papagayo and friends.
Well, this is like, what, 1981, right? Mm-hmm. So the velocity on display here is unlike anything we've seen.
Yeah.
So, audiences at the time and audiences discovering this movie on videotape were used to American action movies, which, are fine, but they're certainly not batshit crazy. Right. So, like, the pauses in this movie are very brief, by the way.
Very brief.
It's not like we spend a lot of time getting to know everybody. What's kind of ingenious about the movie, the alchemy involved, is that we meet these people and he's cast them so well that we don't really need to know anything but a few lines of dialogue. And just looking at them, you go, yeah, okay, I got it. Like right. When Bruce Spence comes up out of the ground where he's been laying in wait for somebody to try and steal his gyrocopter, just the way he's dressed and his mannerisms, like, that fucking guy has gone crazy out there in the desert by himself and his pet snake.
Right. Yeah, no, you're totally right. And that's, I mean, again, I think we take it for granted now that this kind of wasteland has been repurposed so many times for so many other things. But to your point, like this was really it in terms of these kinds of movies for a while. I mean, this movie is very popular because it's kind of the first time we see this kind of setting, this punk future, like punk apocalyptic future.
Any apocalyptic film before this, it was a slow, like, trod through the wasteland. Like, it was all very, oh my God, what have we done? Right. This movie is like, it happened, baby, and here we go.
Which is what I appreciate about, this movie and the last movie for sure, is that it just goes. And in it going, I mean, I think it shows the prowess of someone like George Miller to keep a chase the third act of your movie again. And he pulls it off again. It's impressive, isn't it?
And he'll do it again and again. He just
does.
You never feel cheated. It's like, okay, here we go with the chase scene. It's never like, oh, another chase scene. It's like, oh boy, another chase scene.
Well, and the other thing about the chase scene is, I mean, similarly to the last film with our hero and the villain, like they don't really get to fight one another. They don't really get to, like, there's not in these movies, there's not a lot of physical combat, which I'm really impressed by also, because it's a lot of in the car. It's almost everything in the car other than the couple times they're at the compound. But Vernon Wells' character dies while on the car. Lord Humongous dies in his car. Hugh Keys-Byrne died on his motorcycle last movie. Like, I really appreciate that about these movies, is that, you know, they are committed to making the car stuff work. And they're committed to having the car stuff be the focus of an entire act of the movie. To your point, this just was not a thing in 81 any more than it was in 79.
It's a chase scene and a shootout. The shootout is the cars.
Right. They don't have, like, there's not really guns in this universe. Like, Max has a gun and barely uses it.
And to your point, Max, always functions as, a piston in the greater machinery of the story, to the point where, he does not, other than Beyond Thunderdome, where he has intimate sort of interactions with the villain. In each of these films, he doesn't have an interaction once with Lord Humongous. Lord Humongous is just a thing out there.
Right. Yeah. No, that's my point. Like, I love that about these movies, is just the
I think him and Lord Immortan or Immortan Joe there, like, they maybe share a look when they're passing each other in a car. Like,
but that's what I like, is that, again, like, the villains are there, but they're dealt with the way they need to be dealt with in a movie that's about car chases. They just die in their car. I mean, really, Lord Humongous gets it. He gets it in this movie at the end. I mean, that practical effect of his car hitting the trucker or the tanker is just holy shit.
It's a thing of beauty.
It is, and this and the fact that you have Vernon Wells hanging on the front of the tanker on top of everything else, two birds with one stone. Yeah, again, like, that's the beauty of George Miller, is he's able to take something as, again, taken for granted for as a car chase, and turns it into a thing of beauty, a genuine thing of beauty. And a lot of that success goes to him, really does. You can't give that credit to a whole lot of other people, because he's the writer, director, pretty much all these movies.
We talked about, we're talking about Mad Max as far as anti-heroes go. Like, I don't think in the first film Mad Max is an anti-hero. He's a hero.
Right. He's a cop.
Yeah. This movie is the movie where Max is an anti-hero, because Max actually does not give a shit about anything.
No.
And it if you watch it again, which, like I said, did last night, like, he just wants his car back and he wants fuel, and that's all. And that's what he does. He only agrees to this crazy plan at the end as a form of revenge, it seems, or as another scenario where Max has been pushed so far that he's just like, fuck it, I'll just do this thing. And it's not for anybody really but himself.
Right. No, you're totally right. And what's interesting is, I mean, again, and it kind of shows up in the next movie just as much as in this movie, but I think that factors into the narrative structure of the movie. I think that works to the movie's favor, that he can just be, like, detached from everything. Because, again, like, these kinds of characters don't work very well when they're rooted in one place. That's kind of the last thing you want, is for Mad Max to be, stuck in, Bartertown in the next movie, or somewhere where he can't drive around and do things. I mean, part of the appeal of these kinds of films is that there is very little in way of the film stopping for a moment to give you a breath. And if we had to see Mad Max leading a pedestrian suburban lifestyle, you wouldn't want to watch that. But George Miller knows what he's doing, getting these movies, kind of into the right position for their third act to bring the house down, really. I mean, the third act in this movie is wild.
Oh, yeah. It goes and it goes. Like, it's the simplest plot in the world. These people have gasoline. These crazies want that gasoline. They need to get away somehow. Max will do that for them. And as soon as all those pieces are in place, it just never stops.
It's like, I think the chase scene at the end of the movie is like 20 minutes long. Like, it's just, it goes.
Yeah. You can tell that, because the plan for Fury Road was started in like 94 or something like that.
Right.
Like, that's when they started writing that movie for the first time. And I believe the idea was, what if we made the last chase in the Road Warrior as an entire movie? Can we do that? Can we get away with that? And it just so happens that that's all the fans have been screaming about the whole time. So...
Right. That's all they've wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that, I was thinking about this when I was in the shower yesterday. I was thinking about this franchise has the problem that The Sopranos had. This franchise, I don't think is necessarily, I'm not sure George Miller is completely involved and invested in making a full-on chase movie, given the other things I've seen him make. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure that that's his intent. And it reminds me a lot of in The Sopranos when the people were watching that show, they're like, there's not enough people being killed. It's like, that's not really the sole intent of the show. And I would say the same thing about Mad Max. I mean, to your point, Fury Road is non-stop. I mean, there's like one scene where they stop at night to, I think, if memory serves me right, like literally there's one scene. But at the same time, like Mad Max, I think for me is so much more than just a car chase movie. Like it's the whole world that all of this is taking place within and it's setting it up to get to that point. They set up enough that the payoff really, really works.
Like, I've always thought of and continue to think of this movie as sort of nonstop. But, there are moments where Max stops to show this feral child a little tiny music box that he found earlier in the wasteland and then gives it to him. So there's little human moments here and there. Like the Bruce Spence character, the autogyro pilot, like immediately forms this weird little romance with one of the residents. She's going to run away with him and stuff. Like, just, I mean, it sounds like it should take a long time, but this movie goes at such a clip that even those are fast, but at least it slows down to give us them, Like, you get to see all these people really cotton to Max, particularly the gyro pilot, who is like calling him buddy and friend, partner by the end. Like, he really wants to be partners with Max by the end, which is really endearing.
Max travels alone, other than with his dog.
Oh, that poor thing, man.
Dog gets shot in this movie, man. Jeez. After the stakes are really high is when a dog dies.
They killed his dog. It's not cool.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'm back. That's what I was. But that's the thing. Mad Max isn't John Wick. Mad Max, like, it's not that Mad Max is inept. It's just he's, like you said, he's not the sole cog making the machine go. He's like a second or third cog, but he's not the first one.
Max knows degradation. He knows failure in this world.
Right.
And that keeps getting hammered over and over again. Particularly here. Here's the ultimate thing in this movie is that these people need to get their gasoline out. So they hire Max to get a rig to haul a gasoline tanker. And then he doesn't want to take it on their crazy suicide mission out. He's forced to do that and gets away, basically. Like, almost, But as it turns out, they fucked him over and it's full with sand. Like, he's not even hauling gasoline. He's just a decoy. And he didn't know.
I know, which I thought was a clever twist. I thought that was very clever at the end of the movie.
Can you imagine the end of a Sylvester Stallone movie in 1985 where his character gets completely duped and then abandoned at the end? Can you imagine a world in which that movie would exist, or a Schwarzenegger action movie?
No.
And not only that, but it's satisfying.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, to your point, I think the payoff at the end of the movie works because, again, like, you have to do what you have to do to survive in the wasteland is what it feels like. And it's made very clear that that's the case. And you can screw over as many people as you want and get away with it. Like, and that's what happens. Like you said, Max is the decoy. They don't even tell him. They don't even make him aware of that. Because if he wasn't able to sell it, it wouldn't matter.
Another facet of that scene that I find will play out in each of the movies that comes around when people were talking about Fury Road, the end of Fury Road. I kept hearing about this alternate ending, this original ending, which is at the end, Furiosa goes up on that elevator to, open the floodgates with the water and everything. The alternate ending, the crazy alternate ending, was that Max goes up on the elevator with them. And I remember the reaction to that being what I just said, which is like, but that's monumental. Because Max, at the end of each of these, unless he's abandoned, which he kind of is in the next one, here he's given the choice to go with them and doesn't. And he has nothing. So Max, by choice, is a wanderer in this wasteland. Like, he recognizes his own role in this world, which is, I'll come and help out when I can, but then I'm back out there.
Right.
What's his goal? What is your mission, Max?
Yeah, I don't know what it is to exist, to just travel the wasteland. Like, what is he doing? Why is he Mad Max at this point? Like, what about him? I don't know. I'm
What's
trying
the
to figure that out.
drive? It's a fascinating puzzle.
if there is a drive at all, like in a lot of ways, like that's why I said it reminds me of, a lot of what Clint Eastwood did with The Man with No Name. Like, what's his drive?
Money.
I guess. Yeah, I guess their drive would be.
See, that's the thing. The Man with No Name, if he robbed a bank and got enough money, he could just assimilate into regular society and leave the lawlessness behind. There's no chance for that here, except for these little enclaves that Max keeps running into and that he then rejects.
Right.
And it could be said that in that way, he's letting them all die because he's the most capable person in this world, and any group would be like hugely benefited by his presence.
Well, and that's what's interesting is, like you said, like he's such a good wheelman that in a world where everybody drives cars, that's who you need, really, is like an ace wheelman to keep your settlement safe. But that's the thing. It seems like none of these settlements are really that safe. They're in the middle of the open, out in the open with just some like steel walls protecting them from tons of marauders. It's kind of shocking that that's all it takes to keep them away.
Well, then flamethrowers.
Right.
And that's the thing, like not only is Max capable out on the roads for you, like there's a moment where the gate is open and the people, the populace can't even defend themselves, and Max is the one who gets that gate closed and flamethrowers a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Well, he flamethrowers at a whole bunch of people. Don't come at me because he didn't actually light a whole bunch of people on fire. I've seen the movie too.
But to what end, right? Like, I don't know what Max is doing this for. Just because.
Just because.
Just because, I guess. I guess you got to stay busy in the apocalypse somehow.
He's got nothing to lose, but nothing to live for. But he keeps living.
Which is what I don't understand. Like, the character of Max is so strange. He's almost not a character.
He says very little in this movie.
Compared to the last one, oh my God, yeah. I mean, he's pretty much mute in this movie.
I like it, though.
I mean, look, it's very Clint Eastwood. It works. It really works. It makes your character seem very badass, very intimidating. Oh, he doesn't talk by choice. Ooh. And yeah, I guess he's just so good at driving cars. That's what he's known for. Because it's not these like crazy feats of anything. Like what they did in this movie is not that crazy, is it? Like,
no, but he gets the job done.
Right, which is the important thing about Mad Max is similarly to so many other of those kinds of 80s heroes, they don't necessarily need to be the most technically adept. They can kind of fumble their way through things, and Max really does. He really fumbles his way through it sometimes.
Well, he gets fucked up on his own time here. Like
right,
when he gets sent out to get the rig, he gets that rig. When he says, "I'm going to get this tanker out of here and get you guys safe to the north," he does that too. In the next movie, he does what he has to do, except when he chooses not to.
Well, in this movie, he also flips his car over and it explodes, and then they kill his dog.
Boy, they got Chekhov's gasoline bomb in this movie. They pay it off a few times. Let me show you. Here it is. And then we're going to show you take it off the car. We're going to show you put it back on the car. Guess what's going to happen?
Yeah, who would have guessed?
I felt bad for that one guy who gets all of his fingers cut off when he tries to reach for the
metal boomerang.
Metal boomerang. That's obviously a razor flying through the air, and you shouldn't put out your bare fingers. But it just seems so sad to me, him laying there without his fingers and everyone cackling at him. And then he's one of the two guys who kills the dog, and I'm like, kill this motherfucker, this fingerless
Piece of shit. I find all of the villains in this movie to be very charming. Again, we mentioned Vernon Wells a little bit. He's out
and he's proud.
Yeah, he's unfucking hinged in this movie. He's great. And you already mentioned it, but my God, some of this movie looks so dangerous. The third act of this movie is just like, God, I hope you got insurance. Hope somebody's got insurance.
Before we get into the craziness of the stunts and everything, I was watching with my girlfriend, and she pointed out something that I had never actually really noticed before. This movie is such a comic book, and those costumes are so crazy, but everything looks so well lived in that I never really noticed how clean everyone was. I mean, with Lord Humongous, we're going to give him a pass because he seems almost supernatural, but everyone else is really, really clean. And the only one who sort of should get the actual pass is Vernon Wells, because there's a scene of him cleaning himself up at one point. But everyone else seems like they just took a shower and then put on their dusty gear on their way to Burning Man. By the way, would you not say that there's a sequence where they've warned the people that if they send anybody out that they're going to torture and kill them? So there's this jamboree torture kill sequence with them on the hill, and it's just the crazy music is going, and Lord Humongous you can see shouting and shouting and shouting. the entire montage there just seemed to me like the trailer for Burning Man. Like that's people just watched that sequence over and over again and said, "We need to go do that."
Well, yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the production design and the look of everything. It's so unique and distinct, but it does kind of have this like weird tribal quality to it. Like it's not tribal in the way that, I don't know. It's weird. Like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like leather and
it's all fetish wear and auto parts.
Yeah. I mean, another thing like Fallout, the game and the show also cops from this too.
Oh yeah. Well, you kind of can't do an apocalyptic wasteland and not have it echo Mad Max in some way, just because they got there first and they did it so well. Like, as far as a wasteland goes, like, if we were getting into, like, cities and stuff, we never really do that in Mad Max. I mean, a little bit in the next one, but it's all models and stuff. But as far as if we're going to be out there in the wastes, then you automatically owe them a debt.
Right. And not only a debt, but like a massive like debt of gratitude to making this well the first time too, because this is so well done. That's why it's copied so frequently, is because it is so well thought out and so well executed. And look, the car chase at the end of the movie is like maybe 7 or 8 cars deep. That's it. But it's so well done that you forget that there are only 7 or 8 cars and it's not 40 cars or whatever Fury Road ends up doing. And that's what they wanted to make this whole time. I get it. Fury Road is what they've always wanted to make. I know that. You know that. I mean, it's the same way people remember the Godzilla movies. Like, Godzilla wasn't as present in his original movies as the new movies make him out to be. Like, you can only do so much with what you were given with Mad Max. Look, George Miller did a lot more than most people were doing, but you couldn't do Fury Road in 1981. You couldn't do Fury Road when Thunderdome came out either. You had to do it when you could do that kind of scale realistically.
Well, you know what's funny? My memories of Road Warrior are that there were that many cars.
Right.
Like, I know that there were hundreds of cars chasing that tanker truck, and the action was even crazier than I remembered. And then, of course, watch Fury Road and then watch this one. And, you know, the scene, the just walk away scene, to me, in my mind, there are, like I said, hundreds of cars spread out as far as the eye can see. You watch it now, and, like, it's maybe 15, 20 cars.
Yeah.
It's still horrifically threatening, given the scale of everything else. But, like, it now makes me wonder if the Fury Road people will even like Road Warrior if they go back and watch it.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, you know, we talked a little bit about it on the last episode about watching Mad Max. And if you're a fan of Fury Road, would it even be something worth checking out? I feel like if people watch this movie, they might find it not pedantic, but they might look at it and go, why am I watching this when I can watch Fury Road?
Yeah, there are no people on poles vaulting from vehicle to
playing
vehicle.
guitars.
Yeah, this ain't no flaming guitar doofs.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this is just a couple of guys on a truck and, you know, some other cars. But oh my God, you'd be doing yourself a disservice because it's crazy. The action here is totally insane, and more often than not, you can just see that it's Vernon Wells like jumping and running and leaping from vehicle to vehicle, and you're like, Jesus Christ, that's commitment, man. You know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you mentioned it not looking safe, like. Boy, not that it didn't look safe. I'm sure it was being conducted the safest way possible, but it looks dangerous. It looks very genuinely dangerous. And look, you got cars being lit on fire, going off of ramps, hitting into other cars. And you've got real actors hanging on to said cars at the same time. Like, it's fucking nuts. Like, if anything, like, even if you watch this movie and go, I like the or Fury Road more, this is a technically impressive film.
Yeah, man. I mean, what everyone crowed about Fury Road was there's no CG, it's all practical, which was, of course, a lie. In this film, it's all practical. You couldn't do it. Like, the big special effect here is, on occasion, he cranks the camera up to make it look like it's going a little faster.
Right. But that's really, for the most part, just in a lot of close-ups of the actors to make it look more dangerous than it actually is. Because I'm assuming, for the most part, when they have shots of the actors, they're doing that so that it can look better than it is, right? Because, again, they're trying to keep the actors safe by not going 70 miles per hour actually in the cars.
I don't know, man. It's George
Yeah.
Miller.
Yeah.
I think really they're only protecting Mel. I think if you weren't named Max in this movie, you were pretty much fair game for the stunt work.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, again, a lot of the actors are present in the final, set piece of the movie, which takes place on top of an oil tanker, and none of them are stuntmen. I know that much.
Fun was my all.
Vernon Wells was not a stuntman. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, it shows in the movie, like the quality of it's. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Raiders of the Lost Ark in terms of that. The chase towards the end of that movie. Again, we have a bigger truck, smaller cars chasing after it, and I think that they're both fantastic representations of these kinds of chases done right. The way that they're executed, I think, adds not only to the scene itself, but the movie overall. I mean, that chase scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark is widely considered to be one of the greatest set pieces, of stunt work all time. And I would think that this has got to be mentioned in a similar conversation, if not, 1A, 1B, really.
Yeah, these both came out the same year, actually. And I think there you go. There's the best Hollywood chase scene you were possibly going to get. The big studio movie doing a down and dirty chase. The pinnacle is the truck chase at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But just looking across the ocean, this is how you actually do a chase scene. It's this insane. It's this dangerous. These characters are going to die casually. We're not going to linger.
No, which is
They're dead
wild.
now.
Yeah. No fanfare given to almost all of the characters we've been following the entire movie, other than Max. They all, for the most part, all die.
This is one of the only film franchises where the phrase "life is cheap" is actually on display.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they treat Max's life that way too. I mean, Bruce Spence and all of them just leaving him with a tanker full of dirt. I mean, like that, I think further reinforces,
No blame for Bruce Spence here. Bruce Spence is a good friend. He comes and gets him when he's fucked up. Sure. And then he was like, you should come with us in that final scene. Like, Max, you have nothing. Come with us.
But he doesn't want to, because how else is he going to go? That's the thing. Like, to your point, like, what is Max living for anymore? Just cause.
Is Max just an emo kid? Like, come on, Max. Like, no, I'm just going to stay here in the wasteland.
I don't know. Again, I don't know what his motivation is in these movies. And I don't know what the Man with No Name's motivation is either. Like, he's just trying to live and exist, I guess. Without being hassled or bothered by other people. Then other people make his life their business.
Since he lost the only person he loved, no other human can be a substitute. I am interested to see, and I know we're eventually going to talk about Fury Road sort of in detail, but they hint at these ghosts that Max tends to see, and I would love to see a movie where Max constantly fails.
Yeah, me too.
I want to see him lose again and again and again. Is that terrible that I want to watch Max go through that?
No, I think for the most part, the only thing we've seen him go through is the end of the first movie. Movie, he loses his dog.
Triumphant. He's triumphant in each of these movies, and he's triumphant. Part of it is because he doesn't allow himself to get attached to anybody.
Right.
So I would not mind seeing the movie where Max gets reattached here in the wasteland. I mean, we get a little bit of it in each of the movies. He softens a little bit in each of the movies, but he never commits.
And it's not that I don't get it. I think it works because, again, what George Miller is clearly inspired by. Fistful of Dollars didn't have love interests, right? Like, that wasn't the point of the movie. The Bad and the Ugly didn't have a love interest either. Like,
well, I'm not saying it needs to be a love interest.
No, I don't know. I don't think it. I think, to your point, like, it kind of stands alone as its own thing. Like, Mad Max stands alone, and that's, for me, that's the benefit of this kind of narrative, because you can take it anywhere. The moment he becomes attached to somebody is the moment he can't just fucking up out and leave.
But apparently he has gotten attached to some people because they haunt him in spectral form now at the most inopportune moments.
In Fury Road? I don't remember that at all.
It's pretty much only in the opening scene when he's being chased by the war boys. They keep cutting to his point of view with these ghosts running at him, yelling like, "Max, you have to save us."
Huh. Yeah, I don't remember Fury Road at all then, I guess. I'm super excited to rewatch it because I don't remember that. Why does the character of Max doesn't need any nuance, like, at all?
It doesn't, but every little fucking breadcrumb they drop, I'm just like, ooh, what's that about? What's going on with Max there?
But that's what makes it so interesting as a character, is him having that life before. I think it works because we've seen that side of Max and we don't need to see it again. Do we? I mean, we do what we do, but we don't. Like, I see where you're coming from. Like, it would be nice to see that, but I don't think the way the narratives are being written now about this character, he's even the focus of the story anymore.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to have at least one that he is. Here's an impossible question for you. Better anti-hero, Max Rokitansky or Snake Plissken?
So I've never seen Escape from LA. I just want to preface.
Okay, who cares?
I just want to preface my answer. I mean, some people care, I'm sure.
Okay. You see that clip of John Carpenter telling that guy to fuck himself when he said, "What happened with Escape from LA? Fuck you."
What the fuck?
Oh yeah, there's a clip online. Check it out.
What is Carpenter's deal, man?
I don't know, man. He needs to chill out. Like,
yeah,
we get it.
He does.
You like video games. We get it, man.
And you hate Rob Zombie with a passion. We get it.
Oh, you know, and I understand that, but like, cinematically.
I don't. He said, "Hey, Rob, do your own thing," and then he did, and he didn't like it. What? Did you expect what the man was going to do, for fuck's sake? Is there a better anti-hero, or who's better? I would say Mad Max. Snake Plissken still feels a little bit able to get attached to stuff. Max has seemingly like mastered the art of not being attached to people.
Huh.
Like Plissken, Plissken kind of gets attached to the president. He kind of gets attached to Adrienne Barbeau, like a little more than Max ever does to any of these people.
I don't think Snake Plissken gets attached to those people, but I think he, like Max, feels their deaths deeply, and given an opportunity, will avenge those deaths, which is what he does at the end of Escape from New York. Like, destroying that tape basically fucks the president harder than if he had just left him in the prison. So I think they're pretty even as far as that goes, but I think Plissken is actually much more of an amoral pragmatist. Like, I don't think Max would have shut the world down given the opportunity. And you haven't seen Escape from LA. He does that in Escape from LA.
What does he do?
He shuts the world down. Look, it is not a good movie. Nobody can convince me it is. But the one amazing thing in the movie is that they're trying to get this key, like this electronic key to a satellite that can controls a network of satellites that basically can electromagnetic pulse the entire world and send us all back to the Dark Ages. So he's trying to get that back for the president, and at the end they're convinced that he has given it to them, but he has not. He has it in his own hand, and you can target countries. I don't know, why are we talking about this? That you can use these electromagnetic pulses as a weapon and target a country and wipe out that country, and then you're the dominant force and they're back in the Dark Ages. But Plissken enters the all-world code and sends the world back to the Dark Ages. It's a fucking ballsy, awesome, cool thing in an otherwise terrible remake of Escape from New York. But my point is, given that opportunity, I don't think Max would shut the world down. He would just prevent anybody from continuing to shut other people down, you know?
So you think Snake's more of an anti-hero then for that choice alone?
If we're going on pure anti-heroism, I think Snake Plissken takes it, because ultimately Max is a softie who misses people.
He just can't find a way to get attached to people is the problem.
Max has very little access to psychiatric care, and he clearly needs some, because he's got a lot of issues. Abandonment issues, obviously. Grief that he has not worked out at all. That dog is not a surrogate.
Right. Yeah. I guess based on that decision, I would agree with you. I mean, the thing that's nice about Mad Max is, again, he's in the vein and in the mold of so many other anti-heroes that have worked. It's like a layup. They don't really have to try very hard. I mean, he really is a further down the road depiction of the man with no name from Fistful of Dollars and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like, that's the kind of character this is. It's just a further kind of evolution of it. And that character works because we don't, with the like you said, the less we know about him, the better. And any bit of information that we get about him, because we get so little, feels massive. Like, any little thing feels massive, because there is nothing. And for Mad Max, we got an entire movie about his backstory, but now he's just doing whatever the hell he wants. Like, he seemingly avenged his wife and son at the end of the last movie. I would assume maybe he thinks he did. But in this movie, he's just doing whatever because whatever. Just cuz. Like, And in the next movie, he's inconvenienced by someone, and that's why he starts doing something. This is really the only movie where it's like, it just kind of happens. I mean, even in Fury Road, correct me if I'm wrong, but like he's interjected more into what's going on than in this movie. Like this movie is just like wanders into this town, this little community, essentially, and they just happen to be a refinery that happens to be threatened by Humongous. These are all happenstance. The next movie, he inserts himself into things because he kind of has to. But I like that about this movie. It really is just like he shows up, meets some fucking weird people, helps them out, and then he fucks right back off to what else he was been doing before.
I made a crazy literary comparison in the last film to Gulliver. I'm going to do it again here. Mad Max is not unlike a Raymond Chandler hero in that Chandler's detectives tend to just stumble into a case, or the case stumbles into them. Whereas Dashiell Hammett's characters are like out there trying to hunt down some work.
Right.
So it feels a bit Lebowski. The entire Mad Max storyline. It's just, he shows up and something happens to him, or he happens onto something, and away we go.
And I like that. And I like that at the end of the movie, we get the kind of reveal that the narrator has been a little child throughout the movie. And he goes, and did we ever see the Road Warrior again? Nope, we didn't. And I like that because that puts a nice little button on this movie and says, this is all it was. There is nothing else. And if another movie comes out, it'll probably be similar framing device there too, of this is the story of another encounter with the famed, Road Warrior. Because that's the other thing. Like, I don't even want to call him Mad Max anymore. He's the Road Warrior. Like that's where the reputation is preceding him, is being known as the Road Warrior. Clearly.
I love that it's a throwaway line, and then because they didn't think enough Americans had seen Mad Max that calling it Mad Max 2 was folly. No one would go see a sequel to a movie they hadn't seen. Let's call it the Road Warrior. But it's pulled from a line of dialogue, which I always liked,
Yeah, no, and again, I think that's, success given to George Miller and crew for really understanding what to do with the character that at the end of the last movie, there's not even an expectation of a sequel at the end of the last movie. Like you can end the last movie and walk away from this franchise and it tells a story unto itself. And this movie does as well. Like I think it's almost unfair to compare Mad Max 1 and Mad Max 2 because they're doing such different things intentionally. It's just the character of Mad Max, but everything else is so different. I mean, even he is different. Even he as a character is very different from the character that was at the end of the last movie.
But each previous movie informs the character, which is wonderful.
Right. Yeah. It's well done and well written, frankly. Like, it's shocking.
It's not like they give us much of his characterization in each of these movies, but it definitely feels like there's a progress, an evolution of this guy from who he became and who he will become.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like I said, I enjoyed this movie a fair amount, and I enjoyed the action, the scenes, the action's great, the practical effects are fantastic. Everything about this movie just hums right along.
If you haven't seen it, what's wrong with you? It's a classic.
I would say this is the classic over the last one. Yes. I think this is a better movie than the last one if we're talking like where I would point someone, because Ryan and I are going to do a Film Foundations on this at some point. I would find it hard to point them at the first movie. I feel like this has to be kind of the answer because it really is where the franchise is trying to go. Unfortunately, however.
I don't think there's any judgment on it. It's where the movies go when they go there. It just so happens that the most latest Mad Max film was an extended chase, but it's fucking a genius extended chase.
Right.
But if that's your only interaction with Max and they want to see some of his earlier incarnations, you've only got one shot, right? Don't send them to Mad Max. Don't send them to Thunderdome. Send them to the Road Warrior. They will decide if they like the other two based on whether or not they liked this one. Because this is the one that you're going to remember. If he had not made Fury Road, if George Miller had died, this is the movie they would all have pointed to.
Right. And that's the other thing that's very important when having a discussion about this movie is, we really have lived only in the time post Fury Road half as long as the time in between Fury Road and this movie, or even the next movie. I mean, the next movie comes out in 85. This movie comes out in 81. So we're talking 40 years. And like, it was like, well, how long was it in between 85 and 2015? Like 10, 15, 20 years? Like there was 20 years where there was no Mad Max anything. They were talking about it, but George Miller was also making Babe and Babe 2 and Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2. All those movies were made in between Mad Max 3 and Fury Road.
Oh, listen, man, on all of the Starlog magazine in the back, they would have this rundown of movies in production, and I got to tell you, for it seems like decades, and it turns out it was decades. You would read about the progress of Mad Max. There's a new Mad Max movie. George Miller's on. No, now he's going to do it as a television series. Oh, okay, he's going to make a TV series out of it. Okay, cool. Oh no, he's going back to making a movie. Oh, it's been put on hold again. Now he's doing fucking Dancing Penguins. Okay, George, let me know when there's a new Mad Max movie. I never thought we were going to get one.
30 years, by the way. Mm-hmm. Mad Max 3 to Fury Road. 30 years. It's like David Lynch, really, like with Twin Peaks. Like, hey, you going to do something else? Oh, you did. Okay, cool. Finally. At least there was no time. At least he didn't say at the end of Beyond Thunderdome, in 30 years, we'll check back in with Mad Max.
It got made at the right time. I'm convinced. It's
the
right movie, right time for the effects, right cast. Like, it was...
And I would say the same thing about this movie. I think that this elevates the last movie so much more than the last movie could have done on its own. And I think it pushes the franchise in the direction that it is supposed to go in, which is leaning into the apocalypse and the dystopia of it and not the pre-anything, like firmly rooted in the civilization, breaking down. And there is huge swaths of road that you have to travel, and you might encounter the Road Warrior on those roads. That's what's interesting about this franchise, is that it's not like Luke Skywalker. Like, you don't feel there's some sort of fate behind this character. There's no universe bearing down on him. Like, he just exists in the universe.
If they had rebooted this series in America without George Miller, that would have been the very first thing they came up with. What is Max trying to achieve? Like, what's the goal? What is the thing? Who is the person? It would be by the end of every episode, then it would be even closer to what you made the comparison earlier, that it feels like a TV show, like, at the overall episodic nature, like the Incredible Hulk. But, the Hulk, David Banner, back on down the road trying to figure out a way to reverse the curse of the Hulk. Like, you would get this at the end of each Mad Max. Like, oh, he's a little closer to his goal, but just out of reach.
Right.
I don't want to know his goal.
His goal is existing.
Yeah.
Which is more than enough. And that's what that's, again, like I said, with George Miller, like his sensibilities when it comes to writing franchise films, I think is so bizarre because, look, you want to kind of boil it down. Something like Babe and then Babe 2, Pig in the City, is a fucking insane movie, a genuine insanity film. Babe, Pig in the City is so far from the original one is rooted in reality. It's nominated for Academy Awards because it's such a heartwarming tale with James Cromwell. And then Babe, Pig in the City is exactly what it sounds like. A pig staying in a hotel in the city with a bunch of other animals that also talk. And
there's like animal testing facilities in that movie. It's crazy scary for children because George Miller decided he was going to direct one.
Yeah. And that's what's crazy is, for me, like, George Miller's been doing this with all the things he's done, which is he just does whatever he wants and he makes it whatever he wants. And it just seems to work, just like a Peter Jackson. Like, his style informs so much of what he does, but his style is seemingly something that not just himself is resonating with. Like, he gets a lot of people to resonate with it, clearly with Mad Max, because like you said, I remember there was a copy of Entertainment Weekly I had in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was the Development Hell episodic issue of the magazine. And this was one of the movies that was in there, Mad Max 4. Like, when's it going to happen? Same with, I would love to have a copy of it now because Indiana Jones 4 was in there. Mad Max 4 was in there. Another Alien movie was in there. I've got to think that somebody just had that magazine at their desk and was like, well, let's make this happen.
Yeah, right.
They mentioned Watchmen. I remember they mentioned Watchmen in there. And it's just like so many of those things that were stuck in development hell for 20, 30 years. I don't get it because now you can't stop them. Mad Max 5 is coming out 9 years after the last 9 compared to 30.
Everyone complains like, oh, they're only doing IP, but like they've clearly been trying for a long, long time to do it. It's just that it just so happens that studios are obsessed with IP right now, so they're all finally getting made.
Right, which is crazy that we waited, 30 years to re-embrace something that people in the 80s clearly loved. Like it's odd, but you know what? I'm glad we got around to it finally with some of these things. Some of these things I'm not glad they got around to it. Take the good with the bad.
I will say that in the case of Fury Road, I mentioned earlier, like, I'm glad it got made when it did. And part of that is it took so long to get made that they had to recast Max.
Right. Yep.
Because I'm totally comfortable with the trilogy of Max films we received with Mel Gibson. I can enjoy them without any of the ickiness superseding it. I think if he had made Fury Road, though, I don't know, man. I'd be like, yeah, it's great, but like, there's a problem at the center.
Yeah, Mike. All of the movies that Mad Max was Mel Gibson came out before the world knew who Mel Gibson truly was, which is fine.
We shouldn't end it on that, though.
No, I mean, look, that's the reality of Mad Max is similar to Mel Gibson as a human being. Like, the character has been able to weather a lot. And even we mentioned it last time in the last episode, like very few main IP characters get recast and it works out not just well, but somehow better than what came before it. I'm not saying Tom Hardy's better, but I think Fury Road might be the best of all of these movies as of right now, just given what it is. But Mad Max 2, Road Warrior, without that, Fury Road doesn't exist. So in a lot of ways, like, this is the Mad Max movie. Fury Road is just a derivation of this. It's just taking this idea and running further with it, but none of what comes afterwards exists without Mad Max 2 making a hard pivot into something that the first movie was clearly trying to get at, but couldn't get all the way over the finish line the way that George Miller clearly wanted to.
Well, you said earlier that, Road Warrior to, or rather Mad Max to Road Warrior is not the same as like Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2. However, Road Warrior to Fury Road kind of is.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, it's just they took the idea from this movie and said, what happened if there was no stops for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, it's this movie. Yeah, it's the last part of this movie, spun out. So anyway, this one's a great movie. I
agree. And I think it's even more impressive than Fury Road in a lot of ways because this is all done practically. There is no CGI. Not that I'm complaining about CGI, but CGI allows you to do things that can't be done for real. That's all it should be used for. Not because we can do it, we should. It should be filling in the gaps of practical shortcomings. I don't know, failings even. Like, I don't know how you want to put it, but practicality sometimes meets a wall and CGI gets you up over that wall. But you shouldn't just use CGI just because then you get movies like The Hobbit.
Let's not forget that this is just 2 years with all the same people, 2 years later, that made Mad Max. They're just given more money. It's not like they got safer.
No. More dangerous, frankly. Like, this movie is infinitely more dangerous feeling than the last one.
So much so. Yeah. I mean, like, they have some stunts that go wrong in Mad Max on screen. There's a guy who gets hit with his own motorcycle. It doesn't look pleasant at all, but like it's kind of nothing compared to what's going on here at the end with these people in these fucking cars, man. It's just so insane.
Yeah. And I think that's why the Mad Max fans were clamoring so much for more of this, because this is so iconic. It's so well done. Why wouldn't you want more of this? Because what they will get, and what we'll be talking about on the next episode, is something that I think they found to be very far afield of Mad Max 2. And I think you and I may have some words for that sentiment the next time we come back, because I don't think it's that far afield if it's far afield at all. So yeah, Father Malone, until you and I come back to talk about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, where can people find you in your assorted body of works?
Go over to weirdingwaymedia.com. Well, that's where you are right now. Oh, my God. Well, guess what? There are more shows over there, like Dark Destinations. It's a radio drama I write and produce. Or Midnight Viewing. That's the show I co-host with Chris and Mike White every other week. And then every other week from that, Midnight Viewing Anthologies Attack is hosted by me and Antonio Lepore, where we take a look at anthology movies and comic books and TV shows. And Night Mr. Walters. My God, I got too many things going on. Check out Night Mr. Walters. That's HP's show about Taxi. I'm a co-host on that one, and we're trying to pick a fight with Tony Danza right now. So come over there, listen to that episode, and help us get the word to Tony.
To Mr. Danza. Mr. Danza. What did Tony Danza do to you?
Geez, I don't know. I'm just spoiling for a fight, I guess.
No. Well, you picked an interesting person to fight with. Tony Danza, of all people.
Someone's gotta.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm not picking fights with Tony Danza, but I did pick a fight with Mike Doherty once. You can find me on Twitter, but I don't use Twitter. So go to weirdingwaymedia.com and just check out all the stuff I work on, but check out the stuff that I don't work on more, because that stuff I think is, just as entertaining, if not more so. Like Father Malone mentioned, Dark Destinations, Midnight Viewing, Twisted and Uncorked, The Projection Booth, 80s TV Ladies, the award-winning 80s TV Ladies, and there's plenty of stuff on the network to check out. And like Father Malone mentioned, this is a bonus episode that we're doing. So we got 2 more, and then we'll be doing Furiosa. But yeah, in the next episode, when you hear us again, we'll be talking about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. So until then, catch you on the next episode.